Olaf, thank you so much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since making your acquaintance earlier this year and really enjoying our last conversation, I'm very intrigued to see where this one goes today.
Same here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm slightly nervous, which I think is a great way to start a conversation because we both know where it might lead us. And yeah, generally very, very curious about what we'll discover today.
Wonderful. So, as you're aware, we jump straight in with: is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
As probably most people who start this conversation with you like this, I have spent some time thinking about it, and I try to deliberately not design an answer. What I noticed is that definitely the question has changed. There have been times when I was mostly, I would say, not driven by, but orientated by the question, how do I serve people around me? So how am I a good person? How am I doing my job well? How am I a good husband, a good father? Definitely one of these biographies that is mostly focusing on other people's needs and not very much aware of my own needs, own boundaries, and stuff like that. About 10 years ago, 10 to 12, I discovered this thing called anger and boundaries. And that's been one step in the journey of knowing myself better, learning more about people, learning more about systems, learning more about organizations, my history of developing software, leading in various roles, coaching in various roles, training leaders. It's a wild mix of many, many things, many, many experiences. So, but that was one key thing that I learned, like, oh, wow, anger is something I have absolutely no fucking clue about. I don't understand it. I know it from other people and I know how to be a victim of anger, but I don't know how to, and that set me off on a very specific part of the journey of like generally learning more about my emotions and what they're telling me, and the, you could say, meta question. I come from an academic background, and I somewhat detest that now sometimes because I want to use less academic language because it excludes so many other people from conversations. But the idea of, okay, there was something I wasn't aware of, and it turns out to be really, really important. I think that's the question that I'm now holding. Like, what am I missing? What's back? What's in the back when I'm having a specific perspective? And obviously, that leads to the let's say twin brother question that gets in the way is, what are you missing? So whenever I'm listening to somebody, when I'm learning from somebody, when I'm having a discussion with somebody, my attention is always immediately on, oh, they didn't understand that, they didn't consider that, oh, they are. So it's an interesting thing because I am quite self-conscious, as you probably need to be when you're coaching and doing therapy and stuff like that. And then, like all of us, it's so much easier to think about what the others are doing wrong than, or what the others are doing. It's so much less risky to analyze you, to analyze the world, to analyze people, than to look inside. And still, this, yeah, what are we missing? What are they missing? What are you missing? And what am I missing? I think this is a. It doesn't sound very constructive because it's a fairly deficit-oriented perspective, but that's not how it feels. It feels like, where would be the most value in being curious about, and that's the kind of what am I missing thing. And we already talked about like the state of the world, the human predicament, society, economy, politics, happiness, whatever you name it. Like there's so much stuff out there that could be worrying. There's always so much to do, so much we want. And what I'm currently really interested in is like what's beneath it, like what's the current want or the current need that we've identified, or the current thing that we are trying to get to Because very often my experience is it doesn't really work because we're missing something essential. That's what I'm most interested right now in conversations, in the work, in my own learning.
But it sounds like, to me, it doesn't sound like a scarcity thing at all, which is kind of ironic or almost paradoxical given that the word missing is included.
Hmm.
Because to me, it very much points to what is what exists either within me, within somebody else already that we're just not seeing. So there's almost
Yes,
like there's an instant bounty to be claimed or to be aware of if it comes in, if we do become conscious of it.
interesting. Yeah, totally. So it's definitely also looking for like what are we having that we're not using? What are we? What's there that we don't take into account? So that would
And
help
just
us. Yeah.
really intrigued as to what was that experience like of discovering anger in the ways that you described.
It was really funny. I was at a conference and somebody I liked but didn't really understand. So somebody who was really different from me, but he was intriguing. I think he was from Chile. He was talking about quite esoteric stuff that made me a little cringe. But he was also talking about stuff that deeply interested me. So he ran the session, and no memory of what the headline was. It was just, oh, he's doing another thing. Let's go and let's see what I can learn. And then he asked two questions, and I don't remember the questions, but he basically sorted us into three groups. There were about 40, 50 people in the room. And the logic was, what's the primary emotion that drives you? I think it was anger, fear, and something, but he didn't ask that question. He asked another question so that people went into these three corners of the room. And so I didn't know that I was going to the anger group. And then he asked the second question, which was basically letting me go into a group of people who were driven by anger and denying it. And that was not the frame. So if he had asked me, are you denying the anger that's driving you? I would have said, I have no fucking clue. No, you're talking about somebody else, right? But he asked questions that made me go into this group. And I very suddenly found out like, oh, wow, these people are very much like me in a way that was okay in terms of like, I feel safe at home here, but also like we seem to have something common that's slightly irritating. And then he gave the explanation. And at first I was like, no way. But because I was standing in this group of people and we were all having this insight and we all had this feeling of like, yeah, we are very similar. It's awkward and scary. So that was the thing. And then I started talking to people who knew a little more about emotions, and somebody told me that anger is about setting boundaries, and I was like, "Oh, boundaries, interesting. Okay, we don't even have a German word for that. We use the same word as border, and border is something very official and very like set by somebody else usually. So it doesn't when I use the word border, it doesn't feel like that's something I can control or I have any say in, and that's just one aspect. So yeah, that set me off on a journey of curiosity and learning patterns that I knew from my dad. My dad was a fairly submissive husband, but he would occasionally like explode, not in any violent way. Usually doors would slam and he would go out and he would shout and things like that. So the submission and the neglecting of anger is definitely something that I just copied as children do. The being loud and slamming doors is something that I hated, so I didn't copy that. Yeah, so repressing anger was a pattern that I got from home, and it's still something that is part of me. Like when somebody I like asks me for something that in general I would also like to do, but I don't have the time. I have a really hard time saying no, but I know that now, and so
Yeah.
I'm working with it.
I find this fascinating in life. For me, there was a very big denial earlier in my life about, um, my father not being around or not living in the same country and how it didn't affect me. And the
Hmm.
plot twist, it most certainly did. But it took me probably until my early 30s before I could admit that because I wanted to be strong, I wanted to be independent, And it's interesting for me then with anger. It's almost it's very different perspective. Like anger was freely expressed,
Hmm.
feeling that was almost the only uh, maybe acceptable emotion, I guess, maybe
It
for
often is for men.
yeah, exactly. And so I've been coming at it from a quite a different perspective. But I think
Hmm.
the realization. So then, if for me it's not being able to express vulnerability or hurt or something like that, I
Hmm.
think it's really interesting though just to have some moment in your life where it totally flabbergasted you that you pretended it was one other way. And I think when
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
occurs, when you deal with that initial recalibration or reassessing of things, for me, and it sounds like for you too, it really seems to set us up with I wonder what I'm missing now
Yes.
in quite a, as you used the word earlier, curious, like with curiosity. It's not a, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, I don't know this. It's like, I wonder,
Oh,
is there something
I know
now?
that feeling too. I don't always admit it, but since we are just the two of us, this is a
Yeah,
safe
yeah.
space to say so. Yeah, yeah. Feeling like an idiot for not knowing something is that's also one of the side effects of an academic household, right? You have very high uh, stakes and elaborate conversations, and you learn how to have arguments, and etc. etc. And you always need to look, you know everything, and you need to um, so just admitting I don't know. This, I remember finding a letter from my father when I was about 50. I was moving and I was going through stuff. And I found this thing. My parents did something weird when I turned 18, which is like the coming of age age in Germany. And they did some little celebration. They went to a nice restaurant with us, with me and my brother. They did the same when he turned 18 2 years later. And they had very official speeches prepared in writing to release us from their responsibility as parents. At the time, and for many years afterwards, it was a really amazing idea. I don't know anybody else whose parents did that. It had side effects that I'm aware of now, but everything does. But it was quite a cool thing. And so I found this speech that my dad had given to me when I was 18. I had totally forgotten what he wrote. And he said, the way in which you can argue convincingly about something you have no fucking clue about and can thrash somebody into the ground with big words is really scary. And I hope that doesn't get back to you. I hope you learn not to do that before you really hurt somebody or something like that. And I was reading that as I was 50, obviously having had that experience, and
Wow.
it's like one of these pieces of advice that you got and you never listened to. Um, and I, yeah, he was right, and that was one of these idiot
Yeah, but
kind of moments.
isn't it fascinating though that that is a skill that's very much rewarded in in culture, I'd say. Instead of
Hmm.
acknowledging I don't know, I would have prided myself before on being in arguments and getting the other person to see things my way
Totally.
and losing a truth along the way. Like you can see how, I don't know. I sense that you can easily see how we kind of stray away from ourselves or from a contact or knowing of ourselves when there's elements like that. That would be more heralded than somebody just going, "I don't know. I'll try and
Hmm.
find out."
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a lot of things were easier if fewer people learned that as a skill, as a virtue, as something to strive for. Absolutely, yeah.
Just for you with this question of what am I missing? Just curious as to how you might engage with that, like today, like or just in the as an ongoing practice.
I'm getting too many different ways to answer the question. That's why I'm hesitating. Um, let's look at a private context. When me and my partner have some misunderstanding, which no matter how much you love each other and no matter how well you've set up your household, etc., happens, communication. There's usually multiple steps. First, there's some emotional response and some I don't know. I feel shitty. I feel not heard. I feel misunderstood. All of these things, and then I usually notice that I'm a little younger than I could be, and that depending on the situation, if I'm just brooding on my own, then I can kind of care for my inner children. If I'm in the situation with her, I would probably set that aside and go like, okay, I can be an adult, and there's a very little likelihood that whatever happened was actually done in order to hurt me. So then, look at what am I missing that I've done, looking at what am I missing that she's seeing in the conversation. What else about the context am I missing? Like, oh, she was nursing the child all night. She hasn't slept a lot. She's like totally, I'm we on uneven footing in terms of like how much energy we have, something like that. And similarly, when you as another example, when you working in organizations and you're looking at, I don't know, some conflict or some thing that doesn't work, people come to you with like, how can she, I don't know. And then just looking at, okay, what's the simplest, dumbest, reasonable explanation that I can make up for the behavior that is given me as a catastrophe, as a problem, as a hurt, as pain, as whatever. And most things can be explained by lack of attention, lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, saving energy. Like people obviously should be taking responsibility all the time, but taking responsibility is fucking expensive for the brain. So doing what you always do, like the automated habit kind of thinking or doing or speaking or behavior, is like 1,000 times less expensive for the brain. Fun fact. So if people are not behaving at their best, it's probably that their brain is saving energy at a moment that's wrong for me, but apparently not for them. So that's two examples.
I must say I love the clarity of that kind of observation amongst people as either attention, awareness, knowledge, or energy. And it rarely feels to me anywhere near as personal as we ever make it out to be. Like even the reasons why somebody would not be able to either have the bandwidth to be aware of my context, that knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
the bandwidth to pay me attention, or as you say, they're literally saving energy. I think that the vast majority of times that's what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we have this amazing proclivity to weave that into a narrative that fits whatever our experience is or wherever we may be holding some pain or something we're not aware of. Like it's amazing we get on as well as we do as
Yeah,
humans in ways when you think that this is kind of some
totally.
of
Yeah,
our base case operating.
yeah. So one thing I learned from one of my most important mentors, Caitlin Walker, is that whenever there's drama in relationships, um, it's usually not what's really happening that's dramatic. It's what people are making up what's dramatic. And if there's drama, and I'm perceiving drama, I'm perceiving myself to be in drama, if I'm not just watching it on stage, then I'm taking a part in it. I'm writing a part of the script. I'm taking a role. At some point I'm making a choice to also add interpretation, add inference to what's actually happening, add whatever. Imagine an intention that you have that I don't know about, but it gives me a simple excuse to feel angry at you or to make up an intention that I could have had and that I can then feel ashamed about, because some people like to like to seek the reason within themselves. Other people like to find the reason outside. Usually that matches quite well in order to create drama. One thing I learned in school was to, because I was very frequently bored, was that I could look very attentive, give the impression of being totally present while being fully dissociated and elsewhere. And thanks to some feature of my brain, I don't know if it's part of my ADHD talent or some other neurodiversity thing, I'm less good at that now, but as a pupil in school, I could rewind my listening and kind of pay attention to the last 10 seconds of what the teacher had asked. So whenever he would say Olaf, I could make up an answer that would fit me, having been paying attention all along. I noticed at the same time, that must have been 16, 17, last years of school, I noticed that also that ability had another positive aspect, that when stuff was happening around me, people got very agitated. I had this like place inside myself where I could go and like, what game are these people playing? What play are they putting on a stage? And did they ask me to play a role? Did they give me the script? So I had the ability to, when especially when somebody was shouting at me, I was dissociating and looking at him, looking at me, and looking at. As a teenager, I would start laughing. That was not very helpful, but I didn't feel offended. I just found this ridiculous, and so I somehow had this yeah, without consciously being aware of this ability to spot drama and to often, not always, not take part in it. And now with, in relationships, like, that matters obviously a lot harder. But now with the additional reflection and this, like, okay, when I'm agitated, when I'm emotional, when I think somebody's really, really wrong, that there's always a part that I'm adding to this. It's not it's never just outside. There's always something that I'm making up, something that I'm adding to the story, and looking in this way inside, what am I missing? Like, just noticing that's a similar question. It's really, really helpful to,
Yeah.
and then stop engaging in the drama and start re-engaging in the relationship.
It can be a it can be a very satisfying thought sometimes, though, to believe that whoever our counterpart is, that they are the spinners of drama and we are some objective truth, however unsatisfying a scenario that may bring to us. But I
Yeah.
do think that the real a quality or a gift to the capacity to observe things from a distance, even if we are somewhat involved in it, but
Hmm.
also to, it's come up in several interviews. What, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to somebody else, but to just acknowledge some of the absurdity of this life, because like
Yes.
you know, just it can be a moment of laughter before you get back into the trenches of it
Hmm.
again. It can
Hmm.
be, wow, this is my pattern, this is my trigger, I'm aware of this, and yet this is my response again. You know, there's something about that kind of, well, you're saying it isn't very helpful to just laugh in the
Hmm.
response to somebody else's anger or complaints. There is, it's not the whole response, but I think it's a useful part of a response.
Absolutely. And if you're laughing at yourself, uh, in a shit, I did it again kind of
Yeah.
way, I think that can absolutely help release the drama. What I did as a teenager was absolutely arrogant. I was laughing at the others. So there was there was none of that wisdom there, back then. It was just a knack that I had and that I used or abused sometimes. But yeah, like taking yourself too seriously is probably, yeah, not the source of all evil, but definitely one source of a lot of evil.
Absolutely, because when you think of the capacity to ask yourself that question, what am I missing?
Hmm.
And taking yourself really seriously is a total blocker or impediment to being able to ask that question.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
like it's a
Yeah.
really tightly strong grip almost on the formation of an identity or the attachment to an identity, which must
Hmm.
be kind of upheld regardless of
Hmm.
what the information or what this world is telling me around me. I'm really intrigued, Olaf. You mentioned something just in terms of initially with realizing there's boundaries and the what that might entail for you.
Hmm.
And then you also mentioned the acknowledgement of if you are in a discussion with your wife and you realize that she's been up for most of the night or has had little sleep.
Hmm.
Curious for you, how do you, and this is a wide question, so go with whatever you want, but how do you balance that sense of boundaries now and yet also a awareness and compassion for the humanity in others? So, just even from my experience before,
Mm.
I remember getting into an argument with my wife or getting short with her, and I had no idea that she had 2 hours of sleep. So straight away,
Hmm.
I was like, "Well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't even be having this discussion with you. This is
Yes.
impossible for you."
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm just intrigued from your perspective how that goes as well.
Um, I think there are two things. One is because I'm naturally is probably a wrong word, but like my normal, my automatic way of being is caring for other people's needs. So when you look at that spectrum of I have very strong boundaries, I care for myself, and once I'm done with that completely, then I might be paying attention to you. And the opposite, like totally self-sacrificing, I was closer to that end most of my life. And that's still very natural, very easy. I don't really need to think about that. So um, me caring for my boundaries, being aware of my boundaries, is still something that needs effort. It's still something that needs me. Hey, this is. I need to notice energy draining or anger coming up or something doesn't feel right, and then I need to consciously. Oh, I need to take care of myself now. So there have been situations where this whole I'm confident, I'm aware of my place, and I'm taking space, etc. Where that was kind of in a practice mode, where I was too far on this end, but those were very few occasions, and I thankfully had really good friends at my side who told me very clearly how much I had hurt them and didn't go away before I had understood what actually happened, so that I could A, make amends, and B, say, oh, okay, that's what happened. I really need to not do that again. So, so the balance is usually not in danger of going into the opposite wrong direction. The other thing is that because of my work, because I have been working for 15 years now as a coach. I've trained for the past 4 years a therapist. I have worked a lot with people with emotional issues, with trauma, with shitty things, and cared for them, provided safe spaces for reflection, for crying, for all of these things that we sometimes need. So I know a lot about this. So even when I'm in some kind of struggle with people, in a kind of struggle where I need to set my own boundaries, etc. I will maybe not automatically, but there will be a voice inside of me that also makes sure, like, hey, what's happening for the others in the room. Um, I remember a training experience that was really difficult in this therapist education because I'm so used to being a trainer and used to be responsible for everybody's safety in the room, for everybody's learning experience in the room, etc. So when anything went wrong in my judgment in the group, I was totally trying to rescue everyone. I was trying to make sure that everybody was in a good learning state. I was totally needing, and that took me 2 years to calm down that part of me that was just automatically feeling responsible for everybody else's experience. And it was stressful, and that did inflict help on people who hadn't asked for it, which is also not a good idea. Yeah, so there's professional education and practice. plus a natural tendency to put other people's needs above my own anyway, so that the boundary setting usually, so the danger is that I forget it, and that I learn that. Thankfully, I have quite again, attention span. The ADHD thing is really great in the way that I never brood on anything for very long. So there's, there's always some, and I can dissociate really well. So yeah, so it's a really interesting question. So
Yeah.
I haven't
Just
had that reflection before, so it was a bit meandering, but
yeah,
yeah,
but even are there things then that, because I'm always really just interested in people's processes of how, when they make that big realization that, if you say, if there's a spectrum, you're maybe too over on the extreme, more of like not extreme, but over on the side
hmm
of like, I'm going to look after everyone else needs first. Like, is there w- did you run out of energy for that, or how would you say it kind of came more into your consciousness? I know you're mentioning the anger earlier, but how would you kind of say that came to, how would you say you kind of came to working with that more in terms of maintaining your boundaries?
I would say, from looking back from now, so I'm 55. I This anger insight was, I think, 2014, so 11 years ago. In this specific area, like this self-sacrificing tendency, which is one of the most important qualifications for getting burned out, um, on top of being diligent, which I'm not. So I wasn't really in a burnout risk, but I was definitely in relationships where I allowed, and this sounds blameful, but that was co-created from both sides. But the net result, or the net balance of the relationship, was that I was taken advantage of. Not necessarily, but sometimes obviously because somebody wanted to, but in most relationships, especially in personal relationships, it was just how things developed because I behaved that way, and I found a partner with a matching profile, so to say. So I think I was lucky, because I've always been in circles where I had the benefit of having partners for reflection professionally, as a coach, as somebody who works in organizations together with other people who, especially as I started doing that, were really great at, hey, you need to pay attention to this, you need to pay attention to this, you need to pay attention to this. So I had really good mentors when I started. And I was also lucky in the sense that my family and other relationships I had, also especially my chosen family, my first wife and my daughter, they were really good place for me to be. So even if in some ways the this putting my needs in the background and other people's needs in the foreground was sometimes to my disadvantage, there were enough people around me who cared for me, so that I didn't drain, I didn't. But for this reason, among several others, that was one of the things that in the end led to a separation, because there were more things, and this was not the problem. And now that I'm reflecting on it like that, I think this self-sacrificing tendency is that both of us had. So yeah, I think that's just how we learn, how relationships develop, etc. So I was that was one way I was lucky. The other way that I was lucky is that, I already told you a little bit about my parents and their strange releasing me from their responsibility ritual. The other thing that they did that is quite unusual is that they gave me the confidence as a small child that it was okay to be different. So I have all my life, I still do, grapple with fitting in, with wanting to be part of something. But I've never felt bad for not fitting in, like not really. I always wanted to, but I would rather feel better than the others, um, instead of feeling shitty because I'm not worthy of something. So there's a core in me that was probably created or co-created with my parents when I was very young. There's a core in me that never doubts my self-worth and my right for existence, my entitlement to being loved, or however you want to frame it. So all very, very big words for something that is in the end small but significant. And so one thing that I learned was that, and this is also relatively late learning. I didn't learn that as a child, but like when you talk with people about trauma and about difficult situations, difficult emotions, etc., and I've met lots and lots and lots of people who, at their core, miss like this security, this like this. No matter how much you hurt me or how much you dismiss me, etc., there's some core thing that's safe and sound and alive and that nothing can touch. And that's something that obviously is really, really valuable. I'm glad that I learned about that while I'm still alive, and I can love myself for that, and I can use it as a because that's where a lot of strength is coming from. I never lose hope, for instance, even though when I look outside, we are in really dire circumstances. So I don't have a lot of optimism, but I would never lose hope, and I think that's the reason.
Olaf, that was absolutely gorgeous and really intrigued as what do you sense your parents did to cultivate that with or co-create that with you?
Yeah, I'm deeply grateful for that because yeah, and I am a parent. I have a daughter who's 26 and a son who's 6 months old. So I have a second experience now of something that I've already done and done quite okay given the relationship to my daughter. And I can see now and sense every day how important it is, how rewarding it is, especially for him, but also how difficult it can be to be there for a very young human being. And with all the things he does that can irritate an adult, stop yourself in time when you start to think he's doing that to me, because he's never doing anything to me. He doesn't have a concept of me yet, but he sometimes does things that physically hurt me. I need to stop that. But being able to do that in a way that doesn't blame him, that doesn't make him less than he is, that doesn't dismiss him, that doesn't give him the feeling that he's not okay. That is so hard. And I remember situations when I was 26 years younger where I wasn't able to do it like that. Children survive a lot, thank God, and you can make amends as a parent, and you can have conversations with your kids about things that you could have should have done differently, etc. And I highly recommend that to all parents. That's really important to do. It is another aspect of knowing what my parents did for me, and being grateful for that.
And can you think of anything? Can you think of a moment in particular that you would have totally felt that from your parents?
That's interesting. I don't think I. It's funny. My parents have moved into care homes quite recently, and just 2 weeks ago, we were together in their house to clean up, to tidy things out. And one of the things we did was look through old photo albums. So I have some visuals now of memories that I don't actually have. Um, but one thing that I remember as a feeling more than a specific memory, I was a very unboyish boy. So if I had grown up in this decade, I would have probably been one of these kids who struggle with their gender and who grab the opportunity of, oh no, I don't want to be like that. I want to be different. In the 70s, that wasn't available, so it just felt weak. And one of the things that showed was that I was mostly playing with girls. And as long as I was in kindergarten, primary school, or outside on the street, that was absolutely no problem. But then at the age of 9, I went to the high school, which was an all boys school. And I remember my first birthday party where I was still inviting two of my girlfriends and then boyfriends from the school, which also had been in primary school with me. So they all knew each other. But I remember that that was the last birthday party where I felt it was okay to invite girls, because then it was this all boys thing and no other boy had any girls with their birthday party. So nobody told me not to do that, but that was how it changed. And I remember, I don't remember a conversation about this with my parents, but what I do remember is that they always said, you don't need to do what the other kids are doing. It's totally okay if you do. Sometimes they even ask me, like, do you really want to just follow everybody jumping off a cliff? There was a specific phrase they had for like warning me to take dumb actions, probably rather as a teenager, but I remember that as if they had been saying that earlier too. And yeah, they somehow made it even, and this is the part where it turned into something that also had negative side effects. They made it kind of desirable to be different, and in combination with a few other things about where we lived and the circumstances, etc., that set me up for some things that that I would have rather not had in my life. But yeah, there's always learnings, and I'm so. For instance, it was responsible for me never feeling at home anywhere until I moved here 3 years ago. I had because I felt different from anyone around me. I didn't feel a real need to connect to the people living there, let alone soil or place or anything like that. That's important to me now. So the feeling of homelessness, not in the sense of not having a house, but like not feeling not feeling a sense of this is my home. So Heimat in German.
Yeah.
That was a side effect that in hindsight, I think I might very often in my life have been happier if I had this sense of Heimat somewhere and of coming home, of belonging to a place. But on the other hand, this being okay to feel different has opened up lots of opportunities for me. So any choice has unwanted and
Yeah.
unintended consequences. We learned that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, which is just a fascinating part of life to accept, right?
Yes.
Like this is when you were telling me about that story with your parents, like I felt like my eyes moistening, like
Mm.
and as I often do in moments in these interviews, when it's always such a simple acknowledgement and acceptance of another human being that does it
Mm.
to me. And
Yes.
I guess probably that shows like the kind of absence of it that I may perceive that lots of people get to experience. And I think
Hmm.
that's what brings it up for me. But I
Totally. Yeah.
and then it's just lovely to hear the balance of it too, like, and for us all to keep that in mind whenever there's going to be something probably we appreciate, and there's going to be some other wrinkle or complication or consequence of something that we can't foresee as well. So I guess compassion again for ourselves and for other people that are doing things, because this is a at times treacherous
Hmm.
path to try to plot in front of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really intrigued though. I'd say that feeling you described though of a place in you that doesn't really feel touched by the outside or outcomes of things, that there's a place of worthiness within
Hmm.
you. That's definitely something I'm coming more into in my life, and definitely noticing a relationship between that and hope.
Yes.
From your perspective, I'd just love to hear about what that feels like to you.
You're not asking any easy questions today, right?
So I've realized that.
So, I just want to state that this, I know that this thing is inside because I've occasionally come into situations where I needed it, where like everything else was falling apart. And then I, to my surprise, found out, oh, there's something else. And I've heard from many people about similar experience where everything was falling apart and then there was nothing. And that was an experience I couldn't relate to. And so that's why I inquired. That's why I started to be curious. And at first I was quite doubtful about it because it sounded like a fairy tale, kind of made up whatever. Life is too difficult to unless we postulate some higher being or something like that. So it felt like an excuse kind of thing, or evading of. But then after becoming aware of, after having this idea that there's this core, or however I don't really have a word for it. I was in difficult situations again, and I noticed it again, and then I could kind of connect to it. But it's not something that I could like connect to now. It would require severe pain in order for me to
Yeah.
get to the place inside of me where that thing becomes apparent or sensible in the truest sense of that word. So the hope connection is something that I wasn't really aware of before for very long. I'm not quite sure how the it might even be that this conversation was the first time that I connected the two things. What I was aware of as a topic and as an area of attention, because of some discussions I had been following, books I've read about optimism versus hope, and hope without optimism, and what that means. And then piece of a comic that I really love, Sandman, where he's fighting in hell against a demon, and they're doing this thing where it's a game in many stories where you fight in ways that each person is making up. I am a dragon, and now I'm a virus, and now I am the antibiotics, and now I am whatever. So you have this fight, and then at some point he says, I am hope, and the demon doesn't know what to be, so he kind of wins this thing. It was quite a touching moment for me reading that, and that was one experience where I was like, oh, what is this? What is hope, etc. And then through the work I've been doing the past 5 years with a company called Dark Matter Labs, you've interviewed Simon a few months ago. That's how we got into the conversation, and that's how we got to have this conversation. And he's a colleague in that organization. And I've thought a lot about the world and the ways things might go in terms of society, politics, climate change, etc. Some people call it a polycrisis or meta-crisis, or the human predicament, or the planetary predicament. All big words, or too small words for what it actually is. And the realization I had was, I really don't know what my future looks like. And when I was thinking about retirement recently, because conversations with my parents, and when I was 20, I did the maths of like how our pension system works in Germany, and I was like, this is never going to play out. Like, people are going to shoot me when I'm 70 and when I can't work anymore. That was my funny thought, sarcastic thought when I was 20. To my surprise, now that I'm 55, my realistic assessment of the likelihood of me actually getting any money without working within my lifetime is quite. It hasn't really changed. Plus, I don't even know if it makes sense to believe that our current financial system will still be there when I'm 70. So before we got this child in May, that was a realization I had probably last year, that I couldn't find any external point, external place of direction, external, like this is what I'm going to strive for. This is what I'm going to this is what I want to work for or work towards, or something like that. And that came together with the realization I had a couple of years ago, let's say COVID times roughly, where I noticed that many people were in a lot of pain. I was happy and lucky that enough of my work could just continue online, or I was working online before, so the stuff I was doing was diverse enough that I could still pay for everything. I didn't have to travel anymore, so it was a bit like a gift in many ways. There were some things that were difficult, but nothing that was really difficult for me. we're living in a place where we could be outside and swim and walk and be at the computer, work, get money. So it was, I found myself in a situation where I was better off than anyone I knew. And it was also a time where people had time for reflection, me too. And I had this insight that there was actually nothing anymore that I was expecting from my life. It was like, I've done everything I wanted to do on this earth in this life. Everything else is just icing on the cake. It's not that I'm not looking forward to the icing, but there's so this is back to curiosity where we started, right? So if there's nothing that I need, so no bucket list or anything like that, and if there's nothing that I can really expect, where I can really say, okay, that's something that is realistically possible to happen in 10 years and worth my effort. So the combination of that was just, okay, I'm definitely too curious to stop. Also, life is good. Like it's good. Now reminded of the question that you're going to ask me at the end. It's nice. It's beautiful. It's interesting. This is the most interesting time that humanity has been experiencing, I think. And I'm in a position of knowing a lot about social systems, knowing a lot about human beings, knowing a lot about complexity, etc. So I can play a part in figuring out what we do. I have some leadership qualities. I'm teaching leaders how to work in these crazy times, and so so all of this was just a realization that yes, there's hope inside me, there's curiosity inside me, but there's nothing outside that I want. And the birth of my son obviously changed that a lot, because now there's a human being who not only, as we spoke about before, expects my love and attention and care every day, but also somebody who has a future that is moving beyond mine and giving me a very strong interest in making it possible for him to have a life that is as peaceful, ideally, as mine was, as happy as mine was, etc. And again, if I realistically look into the future, the likelihood of that, I think, is very low. But I'm absolutely willing to do my part in bringing it about. And I'm so curious because I know that, we're definitely missing something.
Yeah.
There are things that we don't know yet about the possibilities of the future. And there's always the possibility that we get surprised. And I get surprised. And so that's
Absolutely. But I think
noticing how I'm coming
there's
back in a big circle to the question from the very beginning. So cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
neatly done. Thank you
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
much. I
It
know it's a
wasn't,
bit
it
much
wasn't
now.
intentional. I was surprised myself.
But it is interesting though. I think even if you bring it back to that question of what are we missing, and one thing I've become, I think, more and more aware of, just either through work or these interviews or the private interviews that I've done away from the podcast around this question, it is almost that feeling of being enough, or that there's some
Hmm.
part of us. And
Yes.
one thing as well in my life that makes me very that's still very connected to hope is the emergence of that knowing or feeling, whether it's in times where it's consistently present or in times where it literally
Hmm.
emerges when you think that feeling of being enough wouldn't occur, like through the loss of different things. I remember in my early 30s having a rough year and thinking, so the things, all these things that I thought that were integral to me aren't present right now, and
Hmm.
I feel okay. Like it's kind of a mind blowing experience,
Yeah, totally.
and let alone when it's just present in a consistent energy. But I think that's something that keeps me totally hopeful, and I
Hmm.
think its emergence in unlikely times is something that you touched on too, which I think
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
hard not to be not optimistic, I'd say, even, but just hopeful. And I think when you combine that with curiosity as well,
Hmm.
I really think that the world, irrespective of what the external landscape is, if those are two components of our own lives, it's very hard to just see it one way or get completely stuck.
Hmm.
Olaf, you were probably giving a lot of hints to what you might suggest a good life is, but to follow parliamentary procedures here, I must ask you, what is a good life for you?
Oh, there's so many ways I could answer the question. I'll start with the most obvious and simple one: is I don't know. Um, I'll continue with a bit of an academic, sarcastic, critical take. I think it's a devious question because one thing I've learned, not only recently, but it's become more apparent recently, is that anything that's good for someone or for something is bad for something else. And I don't want to define my good life at the expense of future generations or other people or nature or climate, etc. And knowing that I can't live in these times, in this society, on this planet, without exploiting and extracting, etc., without going into all of that. Like some people have said, every euro that we touch is covered in blood, and that's truth to that. And it's also something that buys me an ice cream or coffee or heating for my flat or some milk for my son. So yeah, I think to give an answer to the question, to the meaning of the question, instead of taking the word good so literally, being able to enjoy the sunshine in summer and being aware of climate change and like being able to not become mad by knowing these two things are true. Being able to enjoy a cup of coffee and knowing that people and nature are extracted, exploited, etc., in order to make me have a cup of coffee, have the appreciation for the person making the coffee, having some sense of can I overall make choices that it's a bit of a scout thing, right? Leave the world a little better than you found, or leave the place a little better than you found it. I used to be a Boy Scout when I was a child. Came with the school I went to, and this is something that I think is good, that we try to best we can to like look at leaving things a little better. There's a relationship to good than we found them. One thing that somebody recently said to me, a cousin, our generation probably was the last one who, for most of our lives, could just enjoy the benefits of everything we as a species, specifically we as Western civilization, have done to humanity, to the planet, to flora, fauna, etc., etc. And to know this, and to not beat ourselves up, but to also not deny the responsibility for changing the system, so good life in the sense that I can be happy, but I can also increase the likelihood of other beings being happy, becoming happy, or still having a chance of being happy. And I do realize that happy is just a poor replacement for good. So don't want to do the too much of the wordplay.
Olaf, I thought that was some of the examples there were very elegant, and I must say I just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you this morning.
Me
So
too.
I'm delighted that you joined us today on the What is a Good Life podcast, and I hope we look forward to future conversations as well.
Thank you, and I really enjoy your work. Keep it up, and all the best. Thank you.